5 minutes can rewire how your dopamine system gets turned on and off. For real. Not hype. You've probably felt it. The moment you wake up and your brain instantly reaches for your phone, your feed, your little dopamine hits. Now your brain thinks that's normal. Then later, regular life feels kind of flat. Sound familiar? Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine isn't just a reward chemical. It's a learning signal. It trains your brain's receptors and circuits to expect certain patterns, like morning equals notifications or scrolling equals relief. When you flood that pathway early, you can make other rewards feel less exciting. Your dopamine receptors don't vanish, but they can get dialed toward the wrong stuff. Hardwire habits. Fast autopilot. So what's the Stanford protocol? It's not fancy. It's timing. It's light. It's control. And yeah, cold can be part of it because your body pays attention when you force the stress response to wake up on purpose. Try this with me right when you wake up. No phone. First hour is key. You want your brain to earn its dopamine the clean way. Step outside and get bright morning sunlight in your eyes. Open shade is fine. Keep it simple for about 5 minutes to start. You're basically telling your brain, hey, daytime is real. Then if you're doing the cold part, do it after that. A brief cold shower or a cold splash. Short, not heroic, just enough to jolt the system and wake up your alertness. You're teaching your brain you don't have to chase stimulation to feel alive. And here's the part nobody talks about. Dopamine isn't only about pleasure. It's about anticipation. It's about contrast. When you remove the phone and add light early, your brain learns a new baseline, one where effort and attention feel rewarding again. But here's where it gets wild. The timing of dopamine receptor upshifts isn't random. It lines up with how your brain sets its morning learning window. Hold that thought, because the next step is the exact order that makes the whole thing work. Which one are you going to try first? No phone, sunlight, or the quick cold jolt? Drop it below. And if your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Dopamine, reward learning, and why more isn't the answer. Dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical your brain makes it out to be. It's more like a motivation and learning signal, your brain's way of saying, hey, this might be worth chasing. Andrew Huberman talks about this angle a lot. Dopamine helps you learn which cues predict rewards, so you go looking for what's likely to pay off. Sound familiar? That is to check your phone. That urge to refresh. That spike of drive before you even get the outcome. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine is released when you expect something good, or when reality surprises you in a good direction. Your brain links the cue to the payoff. The cue could be your bed in the morning, your coffee smell, a notification sound, a specific snack, a gym bag by the door. Anything that your brain starts to treat like this leads to reward. That's reward learning. And here's the catch nobody talks about. When the cue is strong but the payoff is delayed or inconsistent, your dopamine system can get out of tune. You end up wanting more of the cue, not more of the reward. Then more becomes the trap. Notice how this ties to why more isn't the answer. More caffeine doesn't fix your brain if your day is already wired for quick hits. More scrolling doesn't satisfy you if your dopamine receptors get trained to expect stimulation on demand. Walter Mischel's work on self-control and delayed gratification, the famous marshmallow paradigm, keeps pointing to the same vibe. Your ability to wait and regulate isn't just willpower. It's the skill of handling the cue-driven craving without feeding the learning loop that keeps you on autopilot. Your brain learns what you reliably reinforce. Now, the Stanford protocol angle, why it works for dopamine learning. It reduces the random reward lottery your brain gets from modern inputs, and it swaps in predictable, sensory-driven cues that feel rewarding in a grounded way. Morning sunlight, cold exposure, and no phone in the first hour aren't magic spells. They're structured signals that teach your dopamine system to care about real-world inputs again. That's the rewiring part. Less cue hijacking, more cue clarity. But here's the part nobody talks about. The dopamine receptors aren't just sitting there waiting. They adapt based on what you repeatedly chase. Dopamine receptor dynamics are one of those annoying truths. The system can become less responsive when stimulation is constant and immediate. That doesn't mean dopamine runs out. It means your brain starts treating normal things as not enough. Then your drive shifts toward whatever reliably triggers the biggest cue response, often the fastest, most controllable stimulation you can get. This is why your mood can feel flat, even when nothing is technically wrong. You're not broken. You're trained. And if you keep reinforcing high-intensity cues, the baseline expectation gets dialed up. Let's make it practical. Do this like a quick morning reset that respects reward learning, not like a punishment. Start with morning sunlight on your face and eyes for a short window after you wake up before you touch your phone. Then do cold exposure. Think brief, tolerable cold water or a cold shower at the end. Enough to create a clear signal your brain can learn from. Keep it short and repeatable. That predictability matters. Your brain likes patterns it can count on. After that, you can work out or move your body, but avoid stacking more intense artificial stimulation right away. Bottom line, you're teaching your brain that reward cues can be real, consistent, and earned through action, not through constant interruption. Timing-wise, you want the first hour to be clean. No phone, no doom scroll, no dopamine lattery. Then, within that morning window, you introduce the sunlight cue and the cold cue before you introduce other reward sources like videos, loud entertainment, or high-sugar snacks. Real talk. If you break the chain by grabbing your phone early, you're not failing, but you are reloading the old learning loop. You're giving your brain the cue it already knows how to chase. So make it hard to do the old behavior by default. Put the phone out of reach. Keep it out of the room if you can. Make the new cues the easiest ones to notice. And here's where it gets wild. Once your dopamine system starts associating morning cues with a meaningful payoff, clarity, energy, motivation for the day, your cravings often shift. Not overnight, but they change. The drive stops feeling like panic. It starts feeling like direction. That's reward learning doing its job. You're not chasing more dopamine. You're training your brain to get reliable motivation from cues that don't scramble your attention. Quick takeaway you can do today. Keep your first hour phone free. Get outdoor light on your eyes early. And use a brief cold exposure as a repeatable cue. Then give your brain one meaningful task right after, something you can complete, so the cue learns a solid payoff. Which cue are you going to clean up first? Sunlight, cold, or the no phone rule? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe for more brain hacks every week. The Stanford Protocol. What happens in 5 minutes? Morning first light isn't just healthy. It's a fast dopamine dial-up. Andrew Huberman talks about how light exposure early in the day helps set up your brain's reward and alertness systems, so you're not starting the day foggy and screen chasing. You get a clean signal to your brain that it's daytime, and that timing matters more than people think. Now, here's where it gets real. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine isn't only about pleasure, it's about motivation, salience, and getting your brain to move. Light hitting your eyes kicks off a cascade through your circadian system, which then shifts how your brain regulates arousal and learning. On top of that, the way dopamine receptors work is sneaky. If you flood your system with quick, high-reward inputs, scrolling, snacks, binge content, your dopamine signaling can start to feel meh, unless the input keeps ramping up. But when your brain gets natural cues instead, light, temperature variation, and goal-directed behavior, it tends to respond with more usable receptor sensitivity. Think of it like this. Your brain's not chasing fireworks. It's learning what normal rewards feel like again. So what happens in 5 minutes step by step? First, get outside for morning sunlight. Even if it's cloudy, stand in bright outdoor light and let it hit your face and eyes for a short burst. No phone. You're not doing a 5-minute workout. You're teaching your brain the start cue. After that, cold exposure helps tighten the loop. A quick cool rinse, stepping into cold air, or even holding something cold for a minute can shift your nervous system out of sleepy mode and into alert mode. Your breath often changes too, slower and calmer, or a quick reset that helps your body stop dragging. That combo, light first, then a small jolt, creates a clean, wake-up signal without the dopamine roller coaster of your screen. Now, dopamine receptors and rewiring in 5 minutes. What's actually changing that fast? The point isn't that you permanently change gene expression in one morning. It's that you change the immediate signaling environment. Dopamine release and receptor activity respond to context, time of day, stress level, novelty, and how predictable the reward is. When you start your day with natural inputs and avoid immediate overstimulation, you reduce the odds that your brain locks on a quick dopamine hits right away. Then, when you do normal tasks, answering emails, focusing on something real, your brain has more space to assign value to those actions. Sound familiar? Like you can't get going until you scroll? Practical takeaway for today: do a tight 5-minute ritual before you touch your phone. Go outside, get bright morning light on your face for a moment, then do a brief cool exposure, cold water on your hands, or a quick rinse, or stand in cool air long enough to feel the shift. Keep it simple. Don't negotiate with yourself. Your goal is not comfort, it's clarity. And yes, you might feel a little pushback at first. That pushback is your old autopilot trying to keep running. But here's the part nobody talks about. What you do next determines whether your dopamine system stays calm and task-friendly. If you immediately jump into high-stimulation stuff right after those 5 minutes, you wipe out the advantage. So keep the next few minutes boring and purposeful. One small win, one focused action, something you can finish. What's the first thing you do after your 5 minutes, right? Read, walk, stretch, plan? Which one are you going to try first? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Evidence overview. Peer-reviewed findings and key mechanisms. Morning light doesn't just wake you up, it nudges the dopamine system into a better gear. That's the core idea behind Andrew Huberman's Stanford-style protocol. You set the day up with signals your brain evolved to treat as real-world relevance, not notification pings. Sound familiar? A bunch of us start the day chasing dopamine with apps, and then we wonder why focus feels slippery. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine is less like a pleasure button and more like a learning and motivation signal. Your brain uses it to tag what's worth pursuing. When you get strong, fast, unpredictable rewards like variable reward feeds, dopamine signaling can get tuned toward those cues. Then your baseline motivation drops for slower, effortful stuff. Your receptors and circuits don't change overnight, but the responsiveness of the system shifts with what you repeatedly expose it to. The dopamine receptor side of this gets talked about a lot because receptors and pathways can become less or more responsive depending on stimulation patterns. Huberman often frames it like this. Repeated high stimulation cues can bias your brain toward craving that specific input style, while more natural, structured inputs can help recalibrate your reward expectations. And it's not just dopamine either. Light also drives circadian timing through retinal pathways to the brain, which then shapes how strongly the brain anticipates activity and reward across the day. The end result? Your search drive for meaningful tasks can feel more available, and your phone cravings feel less automatic. Okay, so how does the protocol stack up with real biology? Morning sunlight hits early circadian signaling and also helps your brain lock in daytime physiology, which improves your ability to engage with demanding tasks later. Cold exposure then adds a brief, controlled stressor. That kind of challenge can boost alertness and shift your nervous system out of sleepy inertia, not by turning you into a superhero, but by changing the state your brain starts from. In other words, you're swapping bottomless novelty for high-signal conditions your brain respects. Bottom line, it's about changing what your dopamine system learns to expect first thing. Now for the practical takeaway you can do today. First, get morning sunlight as soon as you can after you wake up. Then skip your phone for your first hour if you can, because the first feed you give your brain is the first teacher. After that, add a short cold burst, like a cool shower or a brief cold splash, and treat it like a reset button, not a punishment. Keep it short and repeatable. But here's the part nobody talks about. You can feel the dopamine rewire faster when you pair these inputs with an immediate, non-glamorous action. If you get sunlight and cold and then go straight to an easy win, a short work sprint, a quick workout, or even 10 minutes of organizing your day, your brain learns this is what first do after first am primed. That's how cue learning gets reinforced without relying on constant novelty. Which one are you going to try first? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Protocol setup, environment, safety checks, and timing. Morning light changes your brain's timing system fast. Andrew Huberman talks about how daylight helps cue circadian rhythms, and that matters for dopamine signaling because your brain's reward chemistry isn't just about what you do, it's also about when you do it. If you're waking up in dim light and immediately scrolling, your nervous system is basically getting mixed messages about what's daytime and what's reward time. Sound familiar? Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine isn't a single switch. It's a set of signals that interact with receptors and circuits involved in motivation, learning, and habit. When you repeatedly chase quick hits, notifications, short videos, endless feeds, your brain leans toward novelty-driven dopamine patterns. Dopamine receptors and downstream signaling can adapt over time, so the same dopamine hook can start to feel less intense. That's the rewiring you're trying to avoid on autopilot, right? So your setup has a simple job. Reduce chaos, then give your brain a clean morning input. Start with light. Get outside if you can, even if it's cloudy. 10 to 20 minutes of morning sunlight is often a good target in practice. But the bigger idea is consistency and early timing. Keep it soon after you wake up. Don't bury yourself under indoor lighting for an hour. Your eyes and brain are collecting timing data. You want them to read morning, not late night screens. Now safety checks, because we're not trying to be tough, we're trying to be smart. If you have a medical condition, glaucoma risk, bipolar disorder, or you've had issues with cold exposure, talk to a clinician before you do anything intense. If cold triggers panic, chest tightness, or asthma flare-ups, skip the cold part. The Huberman-style protocol should be challenging, not dangerous. You're aiming for a controlled stimulus, not a stress crash and burn. Timing is where this protocol really locks in. The no phone in the first hour rule isn't about willpower. It's about what your brain learns in the first moments of the day. Your attention is fragile right after waking, and that first stream of stimulation can train your reward circuitry to expect constant novelty. So you protect that window. Life first, then a calm run of normal life. Water, movement, bathroom, breakfast if you eat, whatever fits your day, but without the dopamine buffet. Cold exposure also needs timing, and it's not a random add-on. Huberman frames cold as a body-level shock that can sharpen alertness and engagement, partly through stress response pathways that interact with neurotransmitters. Don't throw yourself under freezing water as a prove-it moment. Start small if you're new, brief, tolerable cold exposure, then let your breathing settle. If you feel dizzy or it's turning into panic, stop and warm up. The point is to dial in a manageable challenge, not to white-knuckle it. Here's the practical version you can actually do. Step into morning light right away, aim for that early outdoor exposure window, then keep your hands off your phone for about an hour. After that, if you're using cold, do a short, controlled cold session while staying calm and breathing steadily. Keep it consistent across days so your brain learns the pattern. Morning light predicts clarity, and your actions predict reward without constant novelty. But here's the part nobody talks about. If your environment is chaotic, your dopamine system won't care how perfect your intentions are. It'll just keep chasing whatever feels most immediate. Which part are you going to try first? The no-phone window, the morning sunlight, or the gentle cold? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Step-by-step exercise. The 5-minute routine. Concrete instructions. The 5-minute routine isn't about feeling motivated. It's about training your brain's wiring to respond faster to real, physical cues. Morning light, a little cold, and zero reward scrolling. Dopamine isn't just a pleasure chemical. It's also a learning signal, tied to how your brain predicts what's coming next and whether it should lean in. That's why Huberman keeps pointing people toward the basics. Light first thing, cold exposure on purpose, and no phone in your first hour. Sound familiar? Now, let's make this concrete. Your goal is to trigger a burst of dopamine-related signaling by shifting your state quickly, before your environment hijacks it with notifications, feeds, and novelty. Dopamine receptors and dopamine signaling respond to patterns. What you repeatedly pair with attention effort and relief. When you start your day with instant, random rewards, your brain can get pretty picky about what counts as satisfying. But when you do something boring to hard that's controllable, light and cold, your nervous system learns a different association. First can handle discomfort, then first move forward. That's the mechanism in plain English. Okay, here's the 5-minute routine. Set yourself up so you can actually do it. Phone stays away, out of reach if you can. You want morning sunlight on your face and eyes if possible, ideally within minutes of waking. If sunlight isn't available, go outside anyway and use bright outdoor light. The point is that your brain recognizes morning fast. Then you take a cold cue on purpose, short, controlled, and not aggressive. You're not trying to freeze yourself. You're trying to send a clean signal that your body can handle a jolt. Minute by minute, do this. Minute 1, step in a bright light. Stand where the light hits your eyes. Slow breaths. Don't rush. Keep it calm. Minute 2, start the cold exposure gently. Cool water on your face works for many people. Some go with a brief cool rinse. Others use a cold washcloth. You should feel the chill quickly, but you shouldn't be panicking. Minute 3, push just a bit longer. Keep your breathing steady. If you're doing a cold shower, keep it short and controlled. Think quick reset, not endurance event. If you're sensitive, smaller contact is still valid. Minute 4, let your attention lock onto the sensations. Notice the first wave, then the way it settles. This is the part that matters for learning. Your brain updates because you showed it you can ride out discomfort. Minute 5, finish the cold cue. Warm up normally after. Then you do one immediate next step that requires effort, but isn't a screen, like making coffee without looking at your phone, doing a quick workout warm-up, or reading a page of something you care about. Here's the dopamine receptor angle, without the fluff. Dopamine neurons don't just fire for pleasure. They respond to prediction errors. Basically, when reality differs from what your brain expected. If you wake up and your first input is a predictable pattern that's meaningful, light, then a controlled challenge, your brain starts expecting that you'll act, not react. Over time, that can make normal daily effort feel more rewarding and less meh. Also, cold exposure ramps up stress response systems, and that shifts arousal in a way your brain can use to tag the experience as important. That's how you get the wired feeling without needing endless novelty. Catch is, you don't want to turn this into a chaotic ritual you dread. Keep it consistent. Make it easy to repeat tomorrow. And if you hate cold, go smaller. Face cooling, brief cold exposure, shorter duration. The routine is about pairing cues with action, not suffering for points. Hold that thought, because next step is the timing rule that protects the whole effect. What you do right after the 5 minutes can make or break whether your dopamine system stays rewired or slips back on autopilot. Which one are you going to try first? Light first, then cold face rinse, or a short cold shower? And how long did it feel doable? Drop it below. If your brain liked this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. How to track results, metrics, logs, and when to adjust. If you want to know whether the Stanford protocol is rewiring your dopamine system, you can't run it on vibes alone. Dopamine's not just a pleasure chemical. It's tied to learning, motivation, and getting your brain to update expectations. That matters because the protocol isn't one and done. It's repeated signal-to-noise training, morning cues, cold exposure, and a phone-free start that reduce random dopamine hits and strengthen the real plan pathway. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine neurons fire when something is better than expected or when a cue reliably predicts something worthwhile. When your mornings are hijacked by emails, feeds, and scroll loops, your brain gets trained to expect novelty and quick payoff. Then your next dopamine hit gets harder to earn because your baseline is drifting upward while your brain's reward learning gets more reactive. Receptor sensitivity and downstream signaling adapt over time, and that's why your tracking has to capture trend, not a single day. Walter Mischel's work on self-control and delayed gratification, the marshmallow test, is a useful mental model here. When you can hold off short-term rewards, you give your brain space to learn a better system. So how do you track results without turning this into a spreadsheet prison? Use 3 buckets. Metrics, logs, and adjustment rules. Metrics are quick signals you can rate fast, like energy level, focus quality, mood steadiness, and sleep depth the night before. Keep it to a handful of ratings you can do in under a minute. Logs are the what actually happened details. What time you got outside for sunlight, whether you did cold exposure, and how long it felt tolerable, whether you touched your phone before the first hour was up, and what your first digital input was if you slipped. The Stanford Medical School angle here is consistent with what you already know: habits drive physiology and sleep, and your behavior around light and screens shows up in your body rhythms. Now, the part that trips people up: dopamine improvements are often noisy. You'll have mornings where you feel wired, but not focused. Other days feel flat, even if you followed the routine. That's why you watch patterns across days, not perfection. Pick a window like 2 weeks, then look for shifts in your baseline. Do you feel more reliably motivated to start work, or do you still need novelty to get going? Do cravings for quick dopamine, scrolling, checking, browsing, drop earlier in the day? Are your focus blocks cleaner, with fewer rebounds to distraction? And sleep. Are you falling asleep faster or waking up less during the night? Matthew Walker talks about sleep quality being deeply tied to brain performance and emotional regulation, which feeds back into how your dopamine system responds the next morning. Here's when to adjust, and first mean adjust with intent. If your first hour phone rule breaks often, don't try harder. Randomly tighten the environment. Put the phone in another room. Use an alarm clock. Turn on grayscale. Small friction beats willpower. If cold exposure makes you feel stressed instead of sharp, shorten the exposure or reduce the intensity while you keep the consistency. You want the cold to be a tolerable stressor, not a fear response. If mornings are dragging, even when you follow the protocol, check the sunlight piece first. Light timing and consistency can matter a lot for circadian alignment, and that affects your whole dopamine tone. Also, track one personal outcome that signals whether motivation is improving. Not did first work today, but did first start the hard thing without bargaining. James Clear's habit framework is basically pointing to this. Measure the action you care about, not just the outcome you want. Daniel Kahneman would call it reducing noise and improving your decision inputs. In practice, your log might include: what was your first task, how long until you got traction, and whether your focus lasted for that first block. Then your adjustment rule becomes simple. If traction time keeps rising, you tweak inputs, sunlight timing, phone avoidance, cold tolerability, before you tweak your identity or your goals. Hold that thought, because the next move is how to interpret your data when it disagrees with your feelings. You'll have days where you feel bad, but your system is adapting, and days where you feel good, but nothing learned stuck. Which one are you going to try first? Metrics, logs, or a specific adjustment rule? And drop it below. If your brain liked this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Common pitfalls and contraindications. Who should modify or avoid? If you try the Stanford protocol like it's a magic remote for your brain, you might feel great for a week, then crash and burn. And that's the catch. Dopamine isn't one dial. It's a whole system: receptors, signaling, and timing. Huberman talks about nudging your brain toward healthier baseline motivation. But if your body or meds are set up differently, more stimulation can turn into more stress. Sound familiar? Here's the simple mechanism in plain English. Dopamine receptors can change how responsive they are over time, and your brain gets picky about patterns. When you blast dopamine with constant novelty, doom scrolling, non-stop caffeine, gaming late, high-intensity stuff with no recovery, your reward system can start acting like it needs bigger and bigger inputs to feel normal. That's not just a vibe. It's the same idea behind why Walter Mischel's work on self-control and delay of gratification matters. Your brain learns expectations, and those expectations shape how strongly cues hit you. The protocol is trying to give you a cleaner input sequence early: morning light, cold in a controlled way, and no phone. So your dopamine signaling follows a steadier schedule instead of a chaotic one. Now, who should modify or avoid parts of it? First up, anyone dealing with bipolar disorder, especially if you've had mania or hypomania before. Cold exposure plus bright morning intensity can be energizing, and for some people, energizing isn't harmless. If that's you, you should talk with your clinician before you add cold or push intense routines, because your mood system can be unusually sensitive to arousal and sleep disruption. Same goes if you're on psychiatric meds where your prescriber has cautioned you about temperature stress, sleep timing, or sudden routine changes. The deal isn't don't ever improve. It's don't improvise your mental health plan. Next pitfall: people who mess up the no phone part by sneaking dopamine hits anyway. If you still check messages the moment you wake up, you're basically training your brain that the first spike of the day comes from screens, alerts, and social pressure. Your dopamine receptors don't care about your intentions. They care about the pattern you repeat. So if you know you'll fold, modify the environment, not the willpower. Put your phone across the room. Use Do Not Disturb. Tell yourself first light, then phone. If you can't do that safely, start with only the light and leave the rest for later. Cold exposure is the big one for contraindications. If you have cardiovascular disease, uncontrolled high blood pressure, a history of fainting, certain arrhythmias, or you're pregnant, you should skip cold plunges and talk to a clinician before doing anything more than gentle cool exposure. Also avoid pushing through symptoms like chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath, or numbness that scares you. Cold is meant to be a short, controlled stressor. It shouldn't turn into a medical event. Even if you're healthy, don't jump into aggressive cold right away. Cold tolerance builds, and toughing it out can become its own stress spike instead of a helpful signal. And here's another common mistake that's easy to miss. If sleep is already fragile, this protocol can backfire. Matthew Walker emphasizes how crucial sleep is for mood regulation, learning, and emotional control. If your night is already short, fragmented, or stressed, then adding morning intensity can feel like you're trying to start a car with the battery half dead. You might feel wired without feeling good. In that case, keep the light exposure, but go gentler on cold and skip any push through discomfort mindset. You're not trying to impress your nervous system. You're trying to steady it. Bottom line, use the protocol like a tool, not a dare. Modify it if you have bipolar disorder history, cardiovascular risks, pregnancy, fainting issues, or any medication situation where your clinician has advised caution with stressors or wake timing. Start with the lowest risk pieces first, morning sunlight and a protected first hour, and only then consider cold if it's appropriate for you. But here's the part nobody talks about. The best version is the one you can repeat without breaking sleep or triggering symptoms. Which one are you going to try first? Morning sunlight, phone cutoff, or cold exposure? And what's your biggest concern about doing it safely? If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 5 minutes can feel small until you realize your brain runs on cues, not willpower, right? Here's the deal. Morning light tells your brain it's daytime. Cold exposure adds a little controlled stress, the kind that revs up alertness. And skipping your phone in that first hour stops dopamine from getting grabbed by novelty. Because dopamine isn't just pleasure. It's more like your brain's prediction signal, what it expects next. When you bombard it with random rewards, your baseline gets harder to satisfy. Your receptors get less responsive to normal life. Then everything feels a little muted until the next hit. Sound familiar? So if you want the fast recap of the Stanford protocol, think simple. Step 1. Within minutes of waking, get outside and catch morning sunlight. Really let it hit your eyes. Step 2. Warm up your body for a minute. Then do a brief cold hit. Cool shower or cold water splash. Just enough to wake up your system. Step 3. No phone. Not for a minute. Not just to check. For the first hour, let your brain earn dopamine from real inputs. Light, movement, breath, breakfast. Why this works so well is the timing. Your dopamine system is more dialed in when your day starts with clear signals. When you stack light plus a little cold, and you remove the constant novelty, your motivation feels more natural. Less frantic. More first can do this. But here's the part nobody talks about. What you do in that first hour quietly sets the tone for what your brain hunts for later. Quick question. Which one are you going to try first? Sunlight, the cold hit, or the no phone hour? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. And next time, We'll break down what to do after that first hour so your dopamine stays steady instead of spiking and crashing.